The phone buzzed like a hornet trapped in my palm, its vibration rattling up my arm as I stood in the kitchen, flour-dusted hands hovering over the half-kneaded dough for my son's birthday cake. The screen lit up with my sister's name, Lila, the one who'd always been the golden child, her texts usually laced with emojis and inside jokes from our childhood summers splashing in the creek behind Grandma's house. But this one? It landed like a slap, the words searing into my retinas before I could even blink. Don't bother showing up to Max's pool bash tomorrow. It's strictly for the elite crowd. You know, VIP kids only. Yours can stream it online if you're that desperate for a peek. My breath caught, a sharp hitch that tasted like bile rising in my throat. The dough slumped forgotten on the counter, sticky and abandoned, much like the fragile thread of sisterhood I'd clung to through years of her ascending orbit while I orbited the ground. Heart pounding against my ribs like a caged animal. I reread it, willing the letters to rearrange into something kinder, something that didn't reek of the polished cruelty she'd adopted lately. Ever since her life had glittered up with that promotion, that sprawling McMansion in the hills, that husband who looked at her like she hung the moon. But no, there was unyielding, a digital guillotine slicing through the last illusion of us against the world. I sank onto the stool, the wooden legs scraping against the linoleum with a groan that echoed the ache blooming in my chest. Confusion swirled first, thick and disorienting, like fog rolling off the lake on those misty mornings we'd sneak out as teens, whispering secrets under the willow tree. Why now? Why this? My boy Ethan, only 8, with his gap-toothed grin and endless questions about stars. Why exclude him from a pool party? It wasn't just the snub. It was the snort I could hear in her voice, that derisive huff she'd perfected over cocktail hours with her new crowd, the ones who drove Beamers and summered in the Hamptons. Anger flickered next, hot and insistent, coiling in my gut like the steam from the cooling oven behind me, but I shoved it down, rationalizing as always. She's stressed, I told myself, fingers trembling as I typed a reply. Work's been killer. Max is turning 10, big deal for her. It's not about us. Not really. But doubt gnawed at the edges, a persistent itch under my skin. Lila and I had been thick as thieves once, sharing everything. The sting of our parents' divorce when we were kids, the way Dad's absence left us scavenging for affection and each other's laughter. The thrill of our first loves, confessed over stolen sips of wine in her tiny apartment before she met Richard. He'd swept in like a summer storm, tall, charismatic, with a laugh that filled rooms and a job in finance that promised stability I could only dream of from my gig at the community center, wrangling art classes for underprivileged kids. We'd toasted their wedding with plastic flutes in the backyard, me in a thrift store dress that pinched at the waist, Ethan toddling at my feet, while my own marriage crumbled under the weight of Jake's late nights and empty promises. Jake, God, even thinking his name now twisted something fresh inside me, a quiet unease I'd been ignoring for months, ever since he'd started networking dinners that stretched till dawn. That night, sleep evaded me like a shadow slipping through cracks in the blinds. The house creaked around me, the old radiator hissing like accusatory whispers, while Ethan snored softly down the hall, oblivious in his spaceship pajamas. I lay there, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy spin, its blades slicing the dim light into fleeting shadows that danced like half-formed suspicions. Jake had been distant lately, his touches fleeting, his eyes skimming over me as if I were a familiar landscape he'd long ago mapped. Just work, he'd murmur when I'd press, pulling me close with arms that felt heavier, less like home. But there were the signs, the faint perfume on his collar that wasn't mine, jasmine-laced and expensive, the deleted texts I glimpsed once when his phone buzzed during dinner, his thumb swiping too quickly to dismiss the notification. I'd laughed it off then, chalked it up to paranoia born of exhaustion, the kind that comes from single mom juggling acts. Love doesn't die that quietly. I reasoned in the dark, denial wrapping around me like a threadbare quilt. We're solid. 10 years. He wouldn't. Morning broke gray and reluctant, rain pattering against the window like impatient fingers. Ethan bounced into the kitchen, his excitement a bright spark against the storm in my veins. Mom, Can we go to Aunt Lila's? She said there'd be a bounce house. His eyes, wide and trusting, mirrored Jake's, the same hazel flecks that used to make my heart stutter. I forced a smile, ruffling his hair, the strands soft and warm under my palm. Maybe, buddy. We'll see. But inside, resolve hardened like cooling wax. I couldn't let this slide. Not for him. Not for the girl I'd been who believed blood meant unbreakable. As I packed his lunch, peanut butter on wheat, crust trimmed just so, I fired off a voice note to Lila, my tone light as spun sugar. Hey, sis. Ethan's been talking nonstop about the party. Figure we'd swing by early, help set up? Miss you. No response. Hours ticked by, the silence louder than any retort, until finally, as I buckled Ethan into his booster for school drop-off, her reply pinged. A thumbs-up emoji, curt and non-committal, followed by Richard's handling setup. Busy day. The community center buzzed with the usual chaos. Crayon scribbles on easels, the sharp tang of glue sticks mingling with the earthy scent of finger paints. But my mind wandered, snagging on fragments. Lila's Instagram stories from last week. Her arm looped through Richard's at some gala. Her laugh frozen in a perfect arc. But wait, whose hand was that brushing her waist in the background? Broad and familiar? No, stop. I shook it off, focusing on little Maria's lopsided sunflowers, the way her tongue poked out in concentration. Yet the unease lingered, a low hum beneath my skin, building like thunderheads on the horizon. By afternoon, the rain had cleared, leaving the air thick and electric, puddles mirroring the fractured sky. Jake texted from work. Late tonight, client drinks. Love you. The words blurred as I stared, guilt pricking at me for the suspicion they stirred. Was this what betrayal felt like? Not a thunderclap, but a slow erosion, sand slipping from beneath your feet until your ankle deep in doubt. I picked up Ethan early, his chatter about recess a lifeline, and drove toward the hills on impulse, the winding road climbing like a vein pulsing toward the heart of her world. Her house loomed at the crest, white stucco and glass, the pool a turquoise jewel glinting in the late sun, laughter already spilling over the fences like champagne foam. I parked down the block, heart hammering, telling myself it was just a surprise visit, a chance to mend fences. Ethan clutched his gift, a handmade rocket ship from his art class, his small hand sweaty in mine. Why are we sneaking, Mom? He whispered, eyes darting to the manicured lawns. I knelt, the gravel biting into my knees, and whispered back, It's a game, sweetie. Like spies. But my voice cracked, betraying the lie. And as we crept closer, the gate ajar like an unwitting invitation, the sound sharpened. Splashes, shrieks of delight, the clink of ice in glasses. Peering through the slats, I saw them, 24 kids in neon swimsuits, cannonballing into the water under the watchful eyes of nannies in crisp polos. Max, Lila's boy, held court from a floatai throne, his crown a cheap plastic tiara that caught the light like fool's gold. And there was Lila, radiant in a sarong that fluttered like butterfly wings, her laughter a melody I'd once harmonized. But she wasn't alone. Richard lounged by the bar, mixing drinks with that easy charm, while a cluster of moms, sleek and sun-kissed, hung on his every word. My gaze snagged on her, though Lila's, leaning too close to one of the dads, her hand lingering on his arm, fingers tracing a path that spoke of intimacies beyond polite chatter. Confusion spiked again, sharp as shattered glass, but then Ethan tugged my sleeve. Look, Mom, Uncle Jake. The world tilted, the air thickening to syrup in my lungs. There, by the pool's edge, towel slung low on his hips, water beating on his chest like guilty sweat. Jake. My Jake, grinning as he scooped a giggling girl onto his shoulders, her pigtails whipping like flags of surrender. But it was the way Lila sidled up to him, her body brushing his in a dance too fluid, too familiar, that cracked the facade. Their eyes met, a shared secret flickering like a struck match, and she whispered something that made him throw his head back in that laugh, the one that used to be mine. Denial crashed over me first, a tidal wave of no, this can't. It's a coincidence, he's here for Max, for family. But the rationalizations crumbled as I watched, rooted like a statue in the hedge's prickly embrace, thorns snagging my shirt like tiny accusations. Anger surged then, molten and blinding, my nails digging crescents into my palms until blood welled warm and coppery. How long? The perfume, the nights, the way she'd started calling him bro with that lilt, inviting him over for game nights while I worked doubles. Heartbreak followed, a hollowing ache that stole my breath, leaving me gasping against the fence, tears blurring the scene into a watercolor of ruin. Love twisted in its death throes, still there, stubborn and foolish, whispering, maybe if I confront them, we can fix this, because what about Ethan? What about us? Ethan whimpered beside me, his rocket ship drooping in his grip. Mommy? Why is Daddy hugging Aunt Lila like that? His voice, small and fractured, pierced deeper than any blade. I pulled him close, his body trembling against mine. The scent of chlorine and sunscreen now tainted with betrayal's sour undernote. Guilt flooded me, for dragging him here, for the fractured world I'd let seep into his innocence. Moral conflict raged, storming now, shatter the illusion for all to see, or slink away, preserve the lie a little longer for his sake. My hand hovered on the gate latch, knuckles white, the metal cool and unforgiving under my touch. Then, the twist uncoiled like a serpent from the depths. As Jake turned, his gaze sweeping the yard, it locked, not on the kids, but on a woman slipping from the house, her robe loose, hair tousled in that post-tryst disarray. Lila's best friend from college, the one who'd always eyed Jake with veiled hunger at barbecues. She paused, their eyes meeting in a conspirator's pact, and he nodded, subtle but unmistakable. Not just Lila. Him. With her, too. The VIP club wasn't kids' games. It was a web of indulgences, my sister the spider at its center, spinning silks around the men she craved, including my husband, while her own marriage frayed in silent complicity. Richard knew. His averted eyes as she passed confirmed it. A man too ensnared in his own affairs to protest. Rage crested, but beneath it a deeper wound, the realization that our bond, Lila and I, had been the first casualty, eroded not by distance, but by her calculated thefts, rationalized as harmless fun, in the glow of her envy for my unshakable love. She'd always whispered she wanted what I had, a family unscarred by doubt. Yet here she was dismantling it brick by jealous brick. I backed away, Ethan in my arms, his tears soaking my shoulder as we retreated to the car, the engine's roar drowning my sobs. No confrontation today. Not yet. But as I drove down the hill, the sun dipping low and bloody, I clutched the phone with her message, still glowing. Tomorrow, I'd reply. Not with words, but with truth. I'd crash her perfect facade. Not for vengeance, but for the girl we'd buried under years of her climbing. And in that shattering, perhaps I'd find the pieces of myself she'd helped break. The road blurred through my tears, Ethan's soft breathing the only anchor. Trust, once a fortress, lay in rubble. But from the ruins, something fiercer stirred, not just survival, but a reckoning. For him, for me, and for the sister who'd forgotten that blood, once spilled together, demands its due.